in a natural context, in a most natural atmosphere. Natural, okay, natural. So you cannot force love. What there was a song, wasn't there? You can't. There was a Beatles song, wasn't there? You can't. I can't remember what it was. Something about you can't. Something. Da, 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 da. Anyway, so I can't even hum it. Okay. Anyway, yes, Father was speaking these words. Praise God. Yes, praise God for love. Yes. All right. So today, a little bit of a. Let's start with a little bit of a cautionary, shall we say, note. And President Trump is sending some nukes to the UK, some nuclear weapons, nuclear bombs. All right. Trump sends nukes to UK as Putin deadline looms. Now, last Monday, a week ago, he said, okay, listen, Putin, you got 50 days, all right? And if you don't do something towards peace in Ukraine in 50 days, then I'm going to lose my patience with you, basically. And now, I guess, to sort of add credibility to that threat, it is a threat. To add credibility to that threat, he's transporting some nuclear weapons to the United Kingdom, and I don't know why. I mean, he can bomb Russia from United States, so I guess it's kind of a, is it kind of a theatrical thing? I don't know. Let's see here. For the first time in over a decade, the U.S. has reportedly deployed nuclear weapons on British soil. Well, perhaps it's for the deterrent to keep Putin from attacking the UK. I guess that would make more sense. Deployed nuclear weapons on British soil as President Donald Trump intensifies his 50-day ultimatum to Vladimir Putin to cease the war in Ukraine. Several B-6112 thermonuclear gravity bombs have been transported to the Royal Air Force Lakenheath in Suffolk, UK, which is believed to have a newly built storage facility last week. This move was made despite protests against the decision to store the weapon, as reported by the UK Defence Journal. The B-6112 bomb is a free-fall weapon released from an aircraft weighing approximately 320 kilograms and boasting an explosive yield more than twice that of the Fat Man nuclear bomb dropped on Nagasaki during World War II. Well, twice? You know, in modern terms, that's not a whole lot, it seems anyway. And also, this is not attached to a missile. It has to be dropped from an airplane. So that makes it vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire and stuff like that. These weapons are speculated to have been flown from the U.S. Air Force Base Nuclear Weapons Center at Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico, marking the return of a U.S. nuclear deterrent to UK soil for the first time since 2008. The 2008 removal of around 110 nuclear warheads signified the end of a 54-year presence of U.S. nukes in the UK, dating back to the Cold War, as the global superpower reduced its nuclear arsenal across Europe, reports The Express. The U.S. Department of Defense has yet to confirm the deployment, with the UK's Ministry of Defense unlikely to disclose the location of the nuclear deterrent. F-35A Lightning II fighter bombers, operated by both the 493rd Fighter Squadron and 495th Fighter Squadron based at Lakenheath, possess the capability to be armed with the B-6112 nukes. In addition to the thermonuclear weapon to the UK's arsenal, the addition of this to the UK's arsenal provides the country with a second nuclear deterrent alongside its Vanguard-class submarines, each armed with 40 deployed warheads. The UK once had a nuclear air force, but this was decommissioned in 1998, choosing instead for a continuous air at-sea deterrent. The Vanguard subs serve as a constant unknown threat to adversaries at all times. So no one knows where these submarines are, you know, and especially I assume they have they're run on nuclear engines, nuclear power, which means that they can stay submerged basically indefinitely. I think that they just have to be supplied from time to time somehow. The Royal Air Force was previously equipped to deploy the WE-177 developed in the UK in case of a nuclear attack. In June, the UK confirmed that it would purchase 12 new F-35A fighter jets, joining NATO's dual-capable aircraft nuclear mission to strengthen continental security. This decision indicated further intent from the nation to reintroduce a nuclear role to the RAF since the end of the Cold War. In an era of radical uncertainty, we can no longer take the peace for granted, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said when confirming the deal. Keir Starmer, of course, is the Prime Minister, as you can see there, which is why my government is investing in our national security, ensuring our armed forces have the equipment they need, and communities up and down the country reap the benefits from our defense dividend. The transfer of nuclear weapons between the two allies also follows President Trump's 50-day ultimatum for Russia to cease its war in Ukraine, which has been largely ignored as the country intensifies drone and missile attacks on Ukraine's civilian population. So we'll see. Let's take a look here. What is 50 days? Let's see. Last week was the 14th. Okay. So let's check and see what exactly is 50 days from July 14th. Okay. I would guess that it's 17, 21, maybe beginning of September. What is 50 days from July 14th. And it is September 2nd. September 2nd. Alright, so that falls just shy of Father's Seonghwa anniversary, right? September 2nd. Father's anniversary is on the 8th this year, September 8th. And so 50 days is a Tuesday. It's a Tuesday. September 2nd from July 14th. In other words, from Monday last week. So, people, things may get so President Trump is escalating to hopefully de-escalate, right? Let's hope that he knows what he's doing, because I'm sure that, you know, if push comes to shove, Putin is going to shove very hard. And I don't know if, you know, let's see. So he's asking Putin to back down, basically, somehow. He's asking Putin to lose face. You know, even if Putin had an intention, I don't think he did, but let's say even if he did have an intent to come to the peace table, negotiation table with Zelensky, now if he agrees to a ceasefire, he's responding to a threat, which is not a good thing for someone who is in an authoritarian position, because it shows weakness. And when you're an authoritarian leader, the last thing you want to do is show weakness, because when you do, then there are always people, you know, around that are going to say, okay, this is my chance to take over. And especially, we saw what Wang Yi said, right, to the EU delegation. He said it in private, but the EU leaked it, saying that China what did he say? China cannot afford, or China cannot allow, something like that, cannot allow Russia to lose the war in the Ukraine. Well, agreeing to a ceasefire would not be a loss per se, but it's a tie, basically. It's a tie, and sometimes a tie is as good as a loss. For Ukraine, a tie would be as good as a win. Finally we stopped them in their tracks. They were coming, and actually Russia has been making slow progress, not a lot of progress, but let me see if I can get rid of some of those black marks on my background there. Can I get rid of that? Maybe not. Okay. Okay, that's better. Okay. But one person estimated that if Russia were to continue making progress in conquering Ukrainian territory at the same rate as they've been doing until now, it would take them 70 years to conquer all of Ukraine. So, in other words, yes, they're making progress, but it's very, very slow, and it's coming at a great cost to Russia. And I don't think that Putin can keep this war up for 70 years. But if President Trump brings nuclear weapons into the mix, which he has, that ups the stakes, doesn't it? And it brings us closer to the midnight on that nuclear clock that we sometimes talk about. President Trump, supposed to be the peace president, until he got this idea that he was on a mission from God. Well, yeah, okay, all right. Okay. All right, now speaking of that, yesterday marked the 6-month anniversary of President Trump's inauguration. And he's happy about what he's accomplished. And so he's talking about that yesterday. And here, Trump hails wins approval ratings at 6 months. Now, some of the articles I see show that, majority of Americans disagree with Trump, and he's unpopular, and all this kind of thing. But actually, when we go to the polling agency that seems to have a pretty consistent record on being right, when you look at it in hindsight, Rasmussen shows that President Trump has a 50% right now, or as of Friday, a 50% approval rating overall. And yes, his disapproval rating is higher than his approval. Strongly disapprove is higher than strongly approve. That is true. But strongly disapprove is not above 50%. It's something like it's in the 40s, right? And then the strongly approve is in the high 30s. So anyway, it is true that he's doing pretty good in the approval ratings. 50% overall approval rating is not bad at all. Hailing his approval ratings within the Republican Party. Now, Trump is talking about within the Republican Party, where it is well above 90%. And successes within the first 6 months of his term, President Donald Trump is pressing Senator Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, for urgency to get his nominees confirmed. Hopefully, the very talented John Thune, fresh off from many victories over the past 2 weeks and indeed 6 months, will cancel August recess and long weekends in order to get my incredible nominees confirmed, Trump wrote in a Truth Social post Saturday night. We need them badly, DJT. Trump marveled at the progress to date in the face of Democrats' attempts to delay nominees and votes and generally obstruct the agenda, voting unilaterally against the One Big Beautiful Bill for budget reconciliation and the $9 billion rescissions package to cut waste, fraud, and abuse out of foreign aid and liberal bias to public media outlets. Wow, time flies. Today is the 6th-month anniversary of my second term, Trump noted Sunday morning in another Truth Social post. Importantly, it's been hailed as one of the most consequential periods of any president. That may be true. That may be true. I don't know. In other words, we got a lot of good and great things done, including ending numerous wars of countries not related to us other than through trade and or in certain cases friendship. 6 months is not a long time to have totally revived a major country. 1 year ago, our country was dead with almost no hope of revival. Today, the USA is the hottest and most respected country anywhere in the world. Happy anniversary. And certainly, it is respected in the sense that NATO is now coming along with President Trump's, shall I call it, demand or request for that the country spend 5% of their GDP on defense. And not that they're doing that, but they've agreed to sort of work toward it, everyone except for Spain. And we see, actually, in Canada, we see Alberta and Saskatchewan actually sort of moving towards referendum, not to join the United States necessarily, but to become independent from the rest of Canada. And apparently, the Canadian, I don't know what they call it, not the Constitution, but their legal system anyway, allows provinces to exit. The United States does not. And if Alberta and Saskatchewan join, I hope they realize this, that they are entering a room where the door locks behind you and you cannot get out. What do we call that? Well, we call it a jail cell. But anyway, yes, the Supreme Court ruled after the Civil War that basically no one may leave. That after the whole thing with southern states seceding and all that kind of stuff, the Supreme Court decided that once you're in, and the door locks behind you. But anyway, yes, Alberta and Saskatchewan are having these referendums not to become necessarily part of the United States, but to become independent republics. And well, that's what Texas did, of course, in the 40s, I think. And to no one's surprise, they eventually joined the United States as a state. All right, let's see here. So Saskatchewan and Alberta doing that, and so respect in that sense. And I think Mexico also, despite all the complaints and so forth, and the criticism and so forth, respects the United States now, and Japan and Korea, China. I think certainly respects the United States. They will not admit it, but they do. Okay. Well, Russia is the problem, isn't it? So Russia now has 43 days to decide whether they're going to respect President Trump or call his bluff. And it may not be a bluff. Trump has faced some GOP infighting on his agenda and the inability to release Jeffrey Epstein files due to court and jurisdictional orders to keep them sealed, but he has noted he has managed to come out of the hiccups with near full approval within the party. My poll numbers within the Republican Party and MAGA have gone up significantly since the Jeffrey Epstein hoax was exposed by the radical left Democrats and just plain troublemakers, Trump wrote Sunday morning on Truth Social. They have hit 90%, 92%, 93%, and 95% in various polls and are all Republican Party records. The general election numbers are my highest ever. People like strong borders and all the many other things I have done. God bless America, MAGA. Trump also praised Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, who revealed the depths of the Russia investigation all the way up to the top of former President Barack Obama's administration, as he has long teased and has been exorciated by the media for not having public evidence for. Great job by young and talented Harrison Fields, Trump wrote in a fourth Truth Social post of his White House Deputy Press Secretary after a televised interview on Gabbard's intelligence release. The panel was fantastic on prosecuting Obama and the thugs who have just been unequivocally exposed on highest level election fraud. Congratulations to Tulsi Gabbard. Keep it coming. So, and General Mike Flynn has on X is calling for all these people involved in the cover-up and the hoax and its cover-up to be prosecuted. And I'm sure they will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. But that phrase, that's a tricky phrase. It may mean something. It may, it sounds like it means a great deal. Wow, the fullest extent of the law. That means, yeah, they're really going to throw the book at them. But um, we'll have to see. I think they may have to work to, come up with some cases. Because, hey, listen, Obama and these other people, they're not dummies. And I'm sure they worked hard to kind of come close to the edge, or maybe but not to actually go across the edge and into illegal territory. I don't know. Maybe they were brazen enough to actually do that. Yes. So, is what they did evil? It is. It is evil, ethically, morally, politically, in every sense. But if you want to put someone in jail, it has to be illegal. It has to be illegal, and you have to be able to convince at least a judge, and preferably a jury, that some illegality was committed. And this may be a Washington D.C. jury. And that's something. If you're going to try this in Washington D.C., you're going to put Obama in jail in Washington D.C. with a Washington D.C. jury, which votes at least 85% Democrat every election. Yeah, let's keep it real, guys. Let's just keep it real, all right? Let's keep it real. So they may have to go to another jurisdiction somehow. Maybe try to go jurisdiction shopping or something. But anyway, I'm a little bit skeptical on what's actually going to come of that disclosure. I'm glad that Gabbard disclosed the things that she did, because now, at a minimum, the Republicans have a lot of material for their political advertisements leading up to next year's midterm election. All right, at a minimum, they have that. And as I mentioned on Saturday, elections may be the place where Democrats are held accountable, right? Where they become unable to get anyone elected for a long period of time, which is, I think, what happened basically after the Civil War for a while, at least in northern states and also nationally. So we'll see what happens to that whole situation, and see if my skepticism can be proven wrong. I hope it is, but I don't know. We'll have to see. Okay. All right. Let's see what else is going on Newsmax. Let's look at some of these headlines. Let's see that Trump and Xi Jinping are going to be meeting. So it looks like Xi Jinping is not under house arrest if they're going to be meeting during the APEC summit in South Korea, according to the South China Morning Post. So apparently he's free to leave the country. Okay. I've been, poking fun at some of these China reports that have been going around on the YouTube that are pretty patently false. Anyway, President Donald Trump might visit China before going to the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit between October 30 and November 1, or he could meet Chinese leader Xi Jinping on the sidelines of the APEC event in South Korea. The South China Morning Post reported on Sunday, citing multiple sources. And I think the dates for that summit have not been hammered down yet. I think it's going to be November. It's going to be after the. So in September, they're having a big military parade in China, and they're inviting all sorts of allies, leaders. Even South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has been invited there. And actually, 10 years ago, Park Geun-hye, the president at that time, attended a similar military march in Beijing. Maybe Trump should actually go there and see how military marches are actually done. I don't know. I think the U.S. military maybe is way past the goose-stepping phase, but maybe he's not going for that reason. It'd be pretty embarrassing, I think, to see the difference. Because one thing that communist countries do very well, they do marches very well. They do march in a very militaristic and a very what shall I say, alpha male type fashion. Okay. The two countries have been trying to negotiate an end to an escalating tit-for-tat tariff war that has upended global trade and supply chains. Trump has sought to impose tariffs on U.S. importers for virtually all foreign goods, which he says will stimulate domestic manufacturing, and which critics say will instead make many consumer goods more expensive for Americans. He called for a universal base tariff rate of 10% on goods imported from all countries, with higher rates for imports from the most problematic ones, including China. Imports from there now have the highest tariff rate of 55%. Trump has set a deadline of August 12th for the U.S. and China to reach a durable tariffs agreement. A spokesperson for Trump did not respond to a request for comment about the reported plans for a meeting with Xi in the fall. Right. And, of course, we are looking for the downfall of the CCP. Not just of Xi Jinping, by the way, because Xi Jinping could simply be replaced by someone else, as he replaced. Who did he replace? I think he replaced Hu Jintao, I believe, wasn't it? And the party kept on going. And the thing is that when you put a new face in, you can tell people, okay, well, the bad guy, the bad guy's out now. Okay, we got a new guy in, and he's a lot better, right? Maybe he's gonna be a dictator too, but a benevolent dictator. Okay, so don't worry. The party's going to reform. This is what they say, and so just the downfall of Xi Jinping alone is not going to help much. In fact, it will extend the pain, because it will extend the lifespan of the Chinese Communist Party. This is what the LDP in Japan has been doing now for about 80 years. LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, actually 80 years ago they were the Liberal Party and the Democratic Party, which then joined to form the LDP in the 50s, I believe. But they've been running Japan almost the entire time in the past 80 years. They were out of power for a short period of time. And the way they do it is that they keep changing their leader, all right? And the electorate says, we don't like you anymore. And the LDP says, okay, don't worry, we got somebody else. We got someone else that we can pull out of the bullpen, and they're gonna fix things, all right? So don't worry. And actually, that process may be happening in the next week or so, actually, because yesterday the LDP lost another election. Last year, they lost their majority in the lower house, and now yesterday they lost their majority in the upper house. So now the LDP is now ruling. The LDP coalition, not just the LDP itself, but the coalition is not enough. Does not have enough seats to form a majority in the lower house or the upper house. So now Prime Minister Ishiba, he's saying that he's going to stay on. Of course, he's going to say that, but it's not his decision. The party elders in the smoke-filled rooms, in the geisha houses of Ginza and so forth, I'm sure they are, even now, it's what time is it now? It's coming up on 9 o'clock, so it's still early. But later on this evening, I'm sure they'll be gathering in their favorite geisha places, or not geisha, but bars in Ginza, to discuss the fate of the Ishiba administration. And they may bring on a new guy to sort of present to the electorate and say, look, see, we can reform, so don't worry. So that's how they've extended their lifespan for 80 years, and we do not want the CCP to do that kind of a thing. We want them to end. We want them to end. Now, earlier today I watched a video which is actually very, very good, and I'm going to put it in a link in the description. It's a YouTube video by a Chinese guy. At least he looks Chinese, he speaks English with a Chinese accent, so I assume he's Chinese. But it was very, very well done, comparing the Soviet Union in 1991 to the CCP today, and talking about the similarities and differences of the two. Assuming that the Chinese Communist Party is going to collapse, how would that work? Would it go like the Soviet Union did? And he says no. Actually, he said that the Soviet Union was able to transition with barely a whimper. Of course, they did have, I think, one or two coup attempts, but with barely a whimper, and no civil war. That was important, and no military action against East European countries that were becoming independent from the Soviet Empire in the late 1980s, after the fall of the Berlin Wall in '89. Whereas China, he says, is a very different situation, because China, well, anyway, watch the video. He says that China most likely will disintegrate into chaos, civil war, perhaps a return to the warlord period that they had in the 1920s, and it's going to be a mess. And the economic effects on the world, he said, is something that we need to prepare for. And if you watch the video, you see that he is a dissident. He was born in China, and apparently he's somewhere today where he can speak freely. Obviously, he's not speaking in China, because a lot of the things he says will be completely anathema to the Chinese Communist Party. But he is saying that the world needs to be aware of what the consequences of a China Communist Party collapse will be in the world economy. And he points out that in 1991, Russia was a relatively small economy, and it was actually most of their trade was being done with their other, their colonies, their other Eastern European countries, or what are today their satellites, right? And if the Chinese economy goes kersplat, like Humpty Dumpty, then it's going to have a tremendous negative effect on the world economy. He said he's not giving that as an excuse why we should support the CCP. Rather, he's saying that we need to prepare for this kind of a consequence, because the world economy is going to go into a huge tailspin when the Chinese Communist Party collapses, and it will. Communism is doomed to collapse. It is doomed to collapse at some point or other, whether they like it or not. But we just need to be prepared ourselves for what happens when that comes to pass. All right. So anyway, Trump and Xi are tipped to meet ahead of or during the APEC summit in South Korea, according to the South China Morning Post. And let's see. It says here that the APEC meeting is going to be between October 30th and November 1st. October 30th or November 1st. Okay. So I guess it was decided that. Okay. All right. We shall see what happens there. Trump going to China at this point? I don't think so. Let's not give credibility to the CCP at this point in time, right? All right, let's see here. What else do we have going this morning? Yeah, President Trump, don't go to China. Just if you want to meet him in South Korea, that's fine, because South Korea is your territory, right? It's your allied territory, and I think, especially, if you consider that China may have had a role in the Butler situation or other assassination attempts, I would not go to China. All right, let's see here. Okay, Dershowitz, have Ghislaine Maxwell speak to Congress. This whole Epstein thing, can't seem to shake it. Okay. All right. Trump hails wins, approval rating of 6 months. We did that. Okay. Futures wise on trade, hope earnings in high gear. Right. So I guess the stock market is going to open higher today. Let's take a look, see if that's true. Well, okay, quarter percent. What's the dollar doing? Dollar's down. Wow, dollar's down a bunch. Nearly 0.5%. It's down across the board except for the dollar's only up against the Indian currency and the Brazilian currency, barely up just a bit. Okay. Otherwise, it's all down. Gold is up some. Okay, 0.69%. Silver, a whole percent is up. Okay. Copper. What's copper doing? Also up 1%. What is copper doing? Let's check. Yeah, copper's on a tear. Let's look at the 5-year chart. Is this 5 years? Yeah, this is 5 years. So it's at a 5-year high. Can we go to 10 years? Yes, it's at a 10-year high, but they won't let us see the 25-year. See, yeah. I have to log in to see the 25-year. But copper is at least a 10-year high. Right. Yeah. Should have bought some copper, huh? Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay, now we're looking at Breitbart. Let's go to top. And questions surround 100 million fire aid for Los Angeles. All right. Mamdani isn't speaking for our party. Well, right. And Gabbard says Obama directed a treasonous conspiracy against Trump. All right. Can she prove it in court? Okay. And right, let's see here. Oh yeah, California man faces murder charges and fentanyl deaths of 2 babies. Tough to read that. Okay. Okay. And Minnesota also now has a communist Muslim, I guess, running for mayor of Minneapolis, Omar Fateh. Epstein files, we might never see them. This town buries secrets. I think that's realistic. Yes. Okay. And Obama administration manufactured intel to push Russia hoax. Okay, we covered that last week. And I think maybe that's all that we can get out of Breitbart this morning. Okay, there's the man himself. All right, let's go back then to, and Epoch Times I think is kind of a disappointment this morning, and they're really not doing much. Okay. Yeah, illegal immigrant accused of fake ICE kidnapping to solicit donations. Creativity, I tell you, God gave us creativity, and we keep on using it in the wrong way. Yes. Okay, recovery. All right. CCP holds rare urban work conference to deal with urban poor amid economic crisis. That's interesting. Okay. So what is happening in China? Or what is happening in China? It's hard to tell, but it is obvious that their economy is not doing well, and some people are speculating that maybe China is going to go the route of Japan. In other words, have a lost decade, or a lost 2 decades, or maybe even lost 3 decades. In other words, their economy may stagnate for 3 decades. But the difference with Japan, though, would be that with Japan, the government basically has the consent of the governed, uh, and that consent does not hinge necessarily on um, economic success. In Japan, I think the consent of the governed is uh, more hinging on security and stability, um, and things like that. In yesterday's election, a lot of right-wing, they call them right-wing, but conservative parties did well, especially parties that have been saying that Japan is accepting too many foreigners too quickly, or that the foreigners who are coming into Japan need to be managed more closely. These kinds of parties did well in yesterday's election, and I'm sure that the government will take that into account in its future policies. With China, their basic contract with the slaves that they govern, that they own and are lords over, is that they will provide a certain level of standard of living to not to everyone, but to especially people in the urban areas, and maybe to a few 100 million people. Not to everyone, but enough to sort of have enough support to continue their rule. And the second thing is that China Communist Party says that they are restoring China's dignity after a century and a half of humiliation, what they call. In other words, the history starting in the 1840s with the Opium Wars, and as I mentioned, even Russia currently occupies territory that China lost to them in the 1850s. So that's another important part of the contract that CCP has with the slaves that it owns. So the slaves will stay quiet and be submissive as long as the Communist Party keeps those promises. But now the Trump tariffs are kind of challenging the CCP's ability to maintain that sort of national pride and so forth. And the economy, of course, is not doing well, and the tariffs have something to do with that as well. So we'll see what happens. But China still has all the guns. They have all the guns. They have a monopoly on lethal force. And we saw what that means in 1989, right? On June 4th, 1989, when there were maybe thousands, maybe tens of thousands of people gathered in Tiananmen Square in Beijing, and they were demonstrating there for freedom and democracy, political reform, and so forth. They were mainly students, and the Chinese Communist Party brought in the tanks. They brought in tanks and just mowed through them like they were cutting the lawn, and killed. We don't know how many they killed, but thousands were killed. And that showed the Chinese people the meaning of lethal force, and the Communist Party having lethal force. And the Communist Party will repeat that again, if necessary, to maintain control. So I think the only sort of hope would be that if part of the military turns around and says, no more, we're not going to kill our own people. When that happens, then it will be over for the Chinese Communist Party. If they cannot control the military and the police, it will be over for them. And we do hear that police are not being paid, they're not getting paid. Military, I don't know. I'm sure the military must be paid, but we don't know. Okay. All right, gotta go. Sorry for the sort of the quality of today's broadcast. I don't have my tech team today, and it took me about 15 minutes to get Rumble going in the beginning. I apologize for that, but tomorrow I'm sure we'll do better. God bless, Godspeed, may His kingdom come quickly.